If you look through the viewfinder, I can't show you. There actually is like a little exposure dial in there that will show you if you're overexposed, underexposed. The reason why I don't shoot automatic, full program is if you ever see a photo where the foreground or your subject is like dark, but the sky is nice and lit, it's probably because the camera is metered for the sky and not your actual subject. If you're trying to get a nice shot where you keep the horizon down low to the photo, it's going to meter to the skies, which is a lot brighter than your subject, so you get dark photos. The way to do that is to properly meter, for your subject and set your exposure properly that way. That's one of the reasons why I don't shoot full automatic. You just have more control over it. And once you start learning how the camera works and what the exposures do and everything, you'll get better and you don't need to use the automatic. And actually, I shoot my digital full manual too. But yeah, I mean, there's, again, these buttons on the side. I actually have no idea what these do. I don't use them. So again, if you know what it does, let me know. This little thing here is for shooting remote with a flash, so you can tie into it. Like I have my Godox thing, which shoots wirelessly to the flash. This is having a little tether to your flash. That's what that's for. This little lever down here, I thought was to show you what the exposure or the aperture looked like, but it doesn't make any changes, so I'm not too sure what that does. This lens, the way it focuses is it's got kind of a checkered pattern, and not even really a checkered pattern. Actually, it looks like this texture in the lens. There's kind of a texture in the center of the viewfinder here, and when you're seeing a lot of this texture, you're obviously out of focus. When you actually see a clear picture, that's when it's in focus. So that's how the focusing works on this. On this lens, which is a little bit newer, it's actually half moons. So you've got a hemisphere up top and a hemisphere at the bottom, and it's broken the image up so that when the image is aligned, that's when it's in focus. So I really like the way that these things focus. It's kind of cool. It's for them to be able to figure that out without using any type of electronics is kind of fun. That's how focusing on this works. So a lot of times you'll see people kind of like panning their camera back and forth or up and down because they need to see something that's actually like a solid line. A lot of times if you're getting into busy textures or fabrics, it's hard to see like where like the image meets up at. So you might see people kind of like pointing at something else or just kind of panning, so they kind of get like a sweeping idea of like where the image is to where they are able to focus. So yeah, that's kind of how these work. That circle with the line through it actually shows you where the film actually is in the camera, and this is handy for people who are not using focus through the lens or looking at the distance. They actually use a tape measure to measure to their subject. You measure from this line to your subject, and that's how far away it is. Always wondered that with movies, you always see the person with the little tape measure. I never knew where they measured from. I always thought it was from the end of the lens. It is not from the end of the lens, it's from where the photo is actually captured at. So that would be where the film is. So this line right here shows you where that film line is. If you didn't know that, you've learned something new today. And this is the camera I picked up at the flea market. I figured I'd kind of show a little bit more because it actually doesn't have film in it. This definitely needs cleaning. This has seen better days. And like I said, I only picked this up for $20, which I can see why. Really, all it needed was just a battery, which again, if you're not familiar with these cameras, you probably wouldn't know that it actually needs a battery. How this works is you wind it and then you can take a photo. And I love the sound that this makes. It sounds like it needs a lot of work. I can just hear that. To open up the back to change the film, you basically just pull the winder part up and it pops the back open. You load your little canister of 35mm over here, you stretch it across. Everybody knows how this works. You put the leading end over here, you do a couple winds, you make sure it's tight. And then another thing that you might not realize is how these work. So as I wind this, you can see this little fabric. This is kind of like a little fabric bag here. Kind of goes across the side. What it's doing is there's two pieces of fabric in there, and as I push the shutter, the first fabric pulls back and then the second fabric closes it. So if I set this to 30th of a second, you still won't be able to see it. So first fabric goes, second fabric follows. It's crazy that that's how cameras take photos. I'm going to set this to 1/4 of a second. See. And that exposes the film that's back here. That's just one thing that happens. And the second thing that happens is this mirror has to get out of the way. So this mirror lifts up. So let's see if we can capture that here. So all these pieces have to work. So again, what this mirror does is, right now it's angled, so image is going through the lens and it bounces up through the viewfinder back here, so you can actually see what you're shooting at. But the film is behind this mirror, so this mirror has to get out of the way, so it flaps up when you hit the shutter. So all that has to happen all at the same time, and it's crazy that they've figured out how to make this work. So if one of these things doesn't work properly, you're not going to get a photo. These are two cameras that I think everybody needs to have, one of these at least, the AE-1 or the AE-1 program. I use the cameras the exact same way on both of them. It's like I don't use the automatic features. I don't even see, like, it will show you inside the viewfinder if you're underexposed or overexposed. I actually don't even notice that when I'm shooting because, again, I use a light meter, so I always know what the exposure needs to be. So if it tells me I'm too dark, I don't pay attention to it. That is Canon AE-1 cameras.